If you look over and over and over again at hundreds of years of science, when have really quantal changes happened? They've happened when fields come together that think they have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Greg Grunberg, and welcome to Talk About It, the podcast where we focus on topics that everybody should be talking about, and hopefully they will be. Not only talking, but screaming about.
Epilepsy shouldn't keep you from doing anything that you want to do.
Talk about it. Talk about it.
While we will continue our focus on epilepsy, of course, we will also look at other health conditions and causes. Our goal is to knock down, drag out, and eliminate stigma and raise awareness. Each episode, you're going to hear from amazing advocates and champions. You will learn, as I will, about how we can all help to make a real difference.
Talking about it is important. It's all about connecting.
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Thank you for talking about it.
Thank you for talking about it.
Talk About It is sponsored by Seizures Are Signs. Seizures Are Signs is dedicated to educating those living with or caring for someone with uncontrolled seizures about the importance of early diagnosis, recognition, and treatment. To learn more, please visit seizuresaresigns.com. Seizures Are Signs is made available by Jazz Pharmaceuticals. All right, so let's jump right into this episode of Talk About It. What you are listening to right now is not Opera Man. This is not Adam Sandler. On this episode of Talk About It, we have the incredible Christopher Austin, and he's a hero in the epilepsy community. NCATS, NCATS, NCATS. That was horrible. He's incredible. Stay tuned. Great. I am so excited. This was supposed to be a surprise guest, Phil Gattone, who you know created Talk About It with myself and Ken Lowenberg. The three of us always love to bring surprise guests on and incredible people. This guy is beyond. This guy is someone that I've been wanting to talk to. When I found out that it was, Christopher Austin, I was like very excited. So that little tease was one side of his brain. Wait till you meet the other side of his brain. I'm going to bring them on right now, and I'm going to learn as you learn. Phil Gattone and Christopher Austin. And by the way, wasn't that the name of the $6 Million Man? Christopher Austin?
I think it was Steve Austin.
No. I remember Christopher Austin, a man barely alive. We can rebuild him.
No, as a matter of fact, as a kid, so many people called me Steve because that's how they knew it. I started, no lie, I responded when people said, "Hey, Steve," I knew who it was because they thought, which I actually took as a great compliment.
Right, of course. Are you kidding?
Absolutely.
Pretty,
look, as long as the check
right?
clears, right?
So.
As long as the check clears, who cares what they call you? That's fine. I could not be more excited to have you on. We just led, you don't know, but we just led with an incredible aria, you call it? I don't know.
Yes, that's the right word.
Thank you. And you just blow me away. You are Opry Man in my mind. And you're how it's. I want to get into collaboration, which is something that you have pioneered and you're encouraging everyone in the medical field to do. But how do you balance these two things? First, actually, Phil, why don't you introduce our guest, and then we'll get into it officially. But I'm sorry, I'm over the moon excited. I'm going to be the dummy in this episode and just learning so much from both of you.
Well, it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Chris Austin. And Chris, you may not remember this, but I actually met you with my wife, Jill. We were at the Kennedy Center together. We sat next to each other.
I remember.
When Mike Milkin, and you were so humble and so kind to us. We're sitting next to you and having a conversation, and you said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." And all of a sudden, you're on the stage in front of all these people talking, and we thought, "Who is this man?" It was sitting next to us, and little did we know that at the time you had just taken on the leadership and serving as the director of NCATS, the National Center for the Acceleration of Translational Sciences. And, I thought when we met that you really had a lot on your plate, a big challenge in front of you.
Yeah.
And now to see you completing that, moving on into a new chapter in your leadership career, really exciting. And I just wanted to say it's a pleasure to have you on this podcast and to see all the great work you've done. And just want to say welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Phil. Thanks for having me. And I remember that evening at the Kennedy Center very well.
Absolutely. And, I thought what we could do in our discussion, we could talk a little bit about the past, where you've come from, how you've gotten through that entire process of leading at NCATS, and then stepping into the present role that you're leading now as, and I think it's partner CEO and Chief Executive Officer for Vesalius Therapeutics. Is that correct?
That's correct, and you pronounced it correctly, which most people.
Well, I looked it up.
I did not pronounce it correctly. I get everything wrong, but I represent the caregiver. I represent the patient. My son has epilepsy. Phil's son has epilepsy. If those that are listening to this right now, and we will have professionals in the neuroscience field and doctors and nurses, but we'll also have patients. And the one thing, and the caregivers, you provide so much hope to all of us. Because when we hear of the pipeline being robust and we hear of all these promising things happening, what we don't hear about is most of the stuff that you've been working on, which is, finding ways to have different. You can explain it better than I do, but when I heard your talks and I find out, I was researching what you've been doing, it gives us hope that many sides of the medical world are talking and can benefit from each other. So why don't you just talk about what is NCATS and how did that come about back in the day?
Yeah. Well, and the idea of NCATS, and you may know that I started a new component of the Genome Institute, the institute that did the human genome sequence. That's what first took me from Merck to NIH, and started a new center there, which eventually got folded into NCATS when it got founded. And the idea of the entire corpus of work that I did at the NIH was to ask a very fundamental question. That is, why is it that developing therapeutics takes so long, costs so much, and fails so much? And isn't there something we can do, or things we can do, to fundamentally change that calculus?
Mm-hmm.
There's this term that you've all heard of, the Valley of Death, and in most circles, it is implicit or explicit that Valley of Death, which is failure, cost, time, is a fact of life, which I think is hogwash. It is complete hogwash.
Yeah.
There is no reason to believe that it has to be the way it is. And if you look at what happened during the COVID pandemic, we see that it doesn't have to operate on that time scale. So I think it's one of the big things that we should all take away from that otherwise awful, really awful enterprise or experience. And so, but what was evident was that if we kept doing what we're doing, if we kept the same incentives, the same teams, the same lack of collaboration, the same kinds of approaches to technology and paradigms of getting treatments developed and deployed to people, that we were going to remain just as unsuccessful as we had been.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to completely rethink, not only scientifically, but operationally, how would we do this better? How would we do this better? And then begin looking at and acting on individual use cases, disease use cases, to try out these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And say, well, if we actually apply these ideas to particular disease problems, does it indeed happen? Can we get this done better, faster, cheaper?
Yeah.
And the answer in every single case was yes.
You mentioned cheaper, though. When I think of COVID, I think of just the extraordinary amount of money that was thrown at it in a very short amount of time.
Right, and that is that was a unique circumstance, of course, and the reason that was done, and the reason it won't be done in other disorders, is that there was an extreme time factor there.
Right.
And so the decision was made, I think correctly, that we have to parallel process as much as possible. And we're going to take many bets simultaneously. We know most of them aren't going to be successful, but we can't afford to do it in series. We have to do it, or we have to do it in parallel. And I think if I could go back, and then we'll get into some individual examples. You mentioned my musical career, and this may be relevant to some of the folks who are listening, who are probably, I'm guessing many will know more about music than they do about science and CRISPR and gene editing and those kinds of things.
Are those rappers? I don't know. Are those rap names?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah. CRISPR
MC Crispers is awesome. His new album is so good.
Is a really important one, which has guided me. That is that. Music, there's a lot of people in music who view it as a technical exercise, which it is. You got to be an expert. But it's all about humanity. It's all about people. It's all about telling stories. It's all about understanding the nature of the human condition. And when something goes wrong, why does it go wrong? That's what opera specifically is all about. And in my view, that's what science and medical research is all about as well. And you ask, well, how does that happen? Is there ever been a principal investigator in an opera who has been successful? The answer is no. It is a massive effort in teamwork. Right. Members who are individually expert, they are better than anyone else in the world at what they do, playing the violin, being a tenor, being the timpani player, whatever it is. But they all have the same music. They all are playing the same song, and they listen to each other.
Yeah.
And this is something I always talk about. In music school, they tell you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Use them in that ratio. And musicians fundamentally understand it. If you're going to do something really transformational, if you're going to participate in the Ninth Symphony, you ain't going to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
And we don't do that well enough in medical research.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, by the way, who is the producer of this podcast, is one of the best musicians I know, and music has come up a couple of times.
It.
No, you are. I mean, but it's all about collaboration. It's all about building upon the music. Like, great music has influence. I mean, there's so many ways to parallel this to science. But I mean, Nick, when you play with people, you get a vibe right away. And it's and like you're saying, Doctor, it's all about the people. It's all about the people you're going to affect. It's all about people working together. I mean, there's so many important things to this. Don't you agree?
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah.
And you can tell almost immediately whenever you get on stage with people that are listeners and the vibe that it creates. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also learned in music that there are, especially as a drummer, that there are people that actually feel the beat, move with the beat, and are vibing with the other musicians, and others that are just on paper. Mm-hmm. They're just playing what is written, and that is it. Right. And they cannot improvise. And they might be great at what they do, but there's a difference, right?
Well, I think it's important in music as well as in science. There is a role for solo players. Absolutely, there is. But it's not to do what we're talking about.
Right.
They are playing a different piece of music, and it's not it's not a value judgment on one or the other. It's just that if you try to play a symphony with a bunch of solo players or one, you're going to be unsuccessful. If you try to do what we're trying to do, get treatments, get diseases understood, get patients to understand what the nature of their disease is for the first time, and have physicians who care of the same thing. And connect that with a particular mechanism that's causing their disease, and have a treatment that is more tailored for them. If you're going to do that, that requires about 20 different disciplines.
Yeah.
20 different disciplines. And they are as different as you can possibly imagine. They use different languages. They have different values, different cultures, different incentives. And that is what I've been trying to overcome my whole career, because it's very clear if you have the interest of the patient at the end, you can't just focus on one. You have to focus. You have to be like a conductor in an orchestra. You understand what each of the players do, but you have got to get those people to work together.
Right, but your job has got to be made so much harder with the personalities you're dealing with. These are the most brilliant minds in the world. I have experienced it as a caregiver. Some of the bedside manner, it is so different from, especially in the area of neurology and brain surgeons. And some of them are absolutely incredible. Others are they are so focused that they don't have this, I don't want to say they don't have the social skills, but it's like, okay, you just have to go, well, there's a brilliant mind there. How do you get those people to not feel offended when you're poking into their research, poking into what they're doing, and saying, guys, let's all create beautiful music together?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, I must tell you. I don't mind telling you, when I was funny story, when I went to one of my neurology residency interviews, and I was going try to but you know what that is, and I walked into the office, the neurology office of a very famous institution to interview with me, and the secretary in the office literally said to me, "Are you sure you're at the right place?" And I said, "Yeah. Why do you say?" I was like, "You ought to be at surgery or someplace else." So he said, "Well, you don't seem like a neurologist to me."
Right.
And
it's so true.
And she was.
I was going to say, you seem like a parent. You talk like a parent, because when we talk, we say, we're not going fast enough. We're not helping. By the time they find something out, my child's going to be dead. My disease will have taken its course. It's going to be too late for me, and maybe even more people, it's going to be too late. But when we say that, oftentimes we're met with this idea that, listen, as a parent, as a caregiver, as someone with the disease, you want us to take shortcuts, and we can't take shortcuts. That was a very common response, to say we got to let this happen the way it's going to happen. We can't take shortcuts, or we're not going to come up with a lasting solution. And we understood that logically. But what's so great about what you did at NCATS was you introduced an idea that it's not shortcuts. No. It's acceleration, because we're collaborating in a totally different way. And when you share that data, you told a story in one of your speeches about you were holding the hand of an ALS patient when he died, the night he died. And you just said, this is ridiculous. We have to do more. Yeah. We have to do better. And then through all the work you've done, you found like one data set for one disease turned out to be very helpful in a completely unrelated disease. Because of the collaboration, you were able to help a whole different, I think it was arthritis, some other product that came forward, and it ended up helping people with arthritis.
Yeah, I mean, for people, I was introduced to this, and sorry to cut you off, I was introduced to this back in the day at the Milkin Institute at this hotel in Beverly Hills. They had this huge event, and I had heard that someone who was in the area of knee surgery, there was some device they were using that could also be applied to brain surgery. And I was like, this is wonderful. This is incredible that we're getting these people together. We're talking about the busiest people in the world. You're listening to this podcast, you're watching this. These are heroes. These are people that are dealing with patients on a daily basis and also trying to advance technologies and help with new therapies. How they have time to actually, back in the day, it was like you had to write it into a journal. Someone had to read it. Then they would say, wait, that might be, is AI advancing this? I'm sure you're working with all of this so that the computers can cross and reference how it can be helpful.
Yeah, I think that there are two I guess secular trends which I think should give our listeners even more hope than they might have already. One is this this recollection or this realization that Phil and you were just talking about, which to a normal person is pretty obvious, but to people who are trained and incentivized to subspecialize, which scientists and doctors are, is sometimes news, which is the knee bone's connected to the leg bone. Right. This is one body. If we look at the biggest, from my point of view, message from the Human Genome Project, it is that Mother Nature is the great reuser, the great repurposer. When most people don't realize, when the Genome Project was done, there was a raging argument about how many human genes there would be. And there was I would say the majority view was, we have to have 10 times as many genes as another organism because we're 10 times as complex. Mm-hmm. The answer turns out we have the same number. We have the same number as a mouse, about the same number as a fruit fly, and half as many as the rice plant. Rice has twice as many genes as we do.
Wow.
And that's a whole other podcast.
Yes, it is.
But the point being is that these parts are used in different ways in different organs, and they're not different genes.
Yeah.
So the knee or the arthritis and a neurological disease, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because they are the same genes which are being operated. The problem is that our for very good reasons, our training infrastructure over the last 50 years has put a very, very high premium on sub-specialization and on reductionism. Now, there are good reasons for that, but the big question for biology now is not how to take Humpty Dumpty apart, but can we put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Yeah.
And that if we every time we do that, we make leaps. And it's not a matter of taking shortcuts. It's a matter of recognizing that A goes with B, and bingo, you get an insight.
Coming up on Talk About It.
Epilepsy, Alzheimer's disease, congestive heart failure, chronic kidney failure, schizophrenia. To call those one disease is as absurd as calling cancer one disease.
Yes.
So the question is, how do we disarticulate that complexity? And that's what's so exciting. It's becoming possible to do this for the first time.
The body is all connected, right? All parts of the body affect each other. We talked about that a little bit, but I just wanted to tell you a story, a little quick story. I was at the eye doctor, and I got LASIK, and I can see a lot better now. But while I was there, they told me the story about this woman who came in, and they were looking at her eye, and they were looking for glaucoma pressure and this and that. And they saw something in the eye that indicates a problem, a coronary problem, something with her heart. You're at the eye doctor. The last thing you would expect is for them to tell you, you need to go see a cardiologist immediately, which is what they told her. And they saved her life. So if you don't think one part of the body is connected to another, you hear about how your stomach and what you eat, you are what you eat, all of that, everything is interconnected. Listen to your body. Just be hyper aware. You know your body better than anybody else, but you have to be aware and you have to listen. All right, let's get back to the interview.
Now that you're passing the baton, you pass the baton to the next leader, and you look back at NCATS and you think, okay, you were there, 10 years or longer? 10 years or so?
I was at NIH a total of 19.
Yeah,
10 running
The
NCATS.
Genome Project and all the work you did there was phenomenal. But just in that time, was there, outside of the Genome Project, when you're from 2012 to 21 or so, 22, was there a highlight, Chris, or two that you say, as I look back, I think, this is really special that I feel like, okay, now we're getting somewhere.
I'm gonna try your patience by giving you three examples. One is in the part of the organization that is in pharmaceutical phenomena vernacular is lead to IND. What that means is you have a kind of prototype drug, you think it might do something, maybe it does something in a cell or animal, getting to a first in human study, and that piece of the Valley of Death. There was we had a $40 million a year program that over the course of those 10 years developed 30 INDs.
Wow.
We had 10 INDs in a single year in 2019. And the reason that's so exciting is it tells you that it is possible to do this better.
Right.
faster. And then we had a finance professor at MIT, Andrew Lowe, did an analysis of the time, cost, and failure rate of our programs versus the biotech industry standard, and the cost and the success rate, well, the cost and the failure rate were half the industry standard, half the industry.
That's crazy. Again, you are the $6 million man. You're making it better, faster, and stronger. I mean, I'm sorry.
Reasons for that, right? But and not all of them are reproducible in the private sector,
right?
But still, the reason I'm so excited about that is that it shows what's possible, right? I mean, it's that we don't have to settle for the fact that it's either doing it the same old way, or we're going to take shortcuts. And I agree, we can't take shortcuts, or we're going to take shortcuts, true shortcuts. We're going to hurt somebody. And know that. But that is not the point. That is a false choice. Let's just say it is a false choice. It's absolutely wrong. The second one was a little bit more arcane, but it's something I'm excited about as a techno nerd. I love these. This whole idea that you could model human disease better in these multicellular human little bioreactors called tissue chips. Watching that and leading that program over 10 years from nothing to where it is now has been nothing sort of miraculous. This whole idea.
What's an example of that? What's an example of that? Like what?
Well, so here's a great example. So the idea, I mean, a typical thing, as we all know, is that we both for drug testing purposes and other purposes, we tend to use animals. And there's good reason for that, thalidomide story. And really, we had no alternative. When this started in the 1950s, what else were we going to do? We didn't have cell lines. We didn't have cloning. We didn't have DNA. We didn't have iPS cells. We didn't have primary human cells. We didn't have any of that stuff. And so it made perfect sense, and still does to a great degree. When we're going to be testing something, put it into a human, we got to have some evidence that it's actually going to be effective and safe. And so animals were a reasonable choice there. However, we know now, it's very clear that and again, newsflash that all of your listeners would say, gosh, these scientists are they must be out to lunch, because newsflash, after all this time, we scientists have discovered that mice are not humans.
Right.
And I know that with absolute certainty. It's very reproducible. And you might say, come on. Now we could get into how that all evolved, but it's very ingrained in the scientific infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And so this idea that we could bring together, and again, here we're talking about this collaboration, we could bring together stem cell technologies, imaging technologies, computation, engineering, microfluidics, and put all of those people together who don't talk to each other. They don't speak the same language. They think they have nothing to do with each other. We put them all together. Could they create little human organs that will represent the structure and function of all the human organs, and use those to develop drugs, safety and efficacy of drugs instead of a mouse?
Right.
And that sounds completely loony, but I'm here to tell you that it is now a reality.
That's
it is now a reality.
That's exciting. That's exciting for a caregiver to hear that. I mean, that'll move things much quicker, because we're talking about
much quicker, because we're all familiar with the long-standing. It's been great. Still is the NCATS epilepsy testing program. Which has been really important for developing the symptomatic anti-epileptics that are out on the market now, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's been but the question is, how do we do better? Mm-hmm. And that's what. So the third is actually what happened during COVID. So what happened during COVID, which gives me great hope for us being able to do this, is when COVID happened. What I had been arguing, as you point out, for people to work together, that the whole's going to be greater than the sum of the parts. What I know, what's trivial for me, is impossible for you, and vice versa. We find this all over, all the time. I had been experiencing resistance, let's just call it that, for a variety of reasons, and some of them valid, some of them not so much. And it's all because of the incentives that are baked into the system we currently have. It's people responding to incentives as they typically do. But when COVID happened, my phone and email started ringing off the hook for people to say, what can you do to help us work together?
Mm.
People who I had been arguing, you got to share your data, you got to share this, got to share that, you got to work with these people. They said,
Right.
I can't do it, I'm too busy or whatever. All of a sudden, that changed overnight.
Oh my
And what that told me was that people intuitively know if they want to make headway, they will share, they
Yeah.
will collaborate.
Yeah.
And they came to me, arguing to me the various things I had been arguing to them for 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's because it affected everyone. But there's also a business here. And there are secrets that I'm sure people want to keep and hold to themselves because they can own. So how do you combat that when
Well, this is another thing that I think is in my I just tell you this, my own experience is, of course you have to consider these things, of course. And it's not just in the business world, but it's in academia too. There are mechanisms to protect both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It's foundational IP and co-inventorship and contractual agreements from the very beginning about how you're going to share. It's actually not that complicated.
Right.
And I can tell you, I can count on one hand of the hundreds of programs that I've done. I can count on one hand the number of programs that didn't go forward for this reason, for IP reasons.
Yeah.
But it gets even better than that. And COVID's a good example of this, is that it was very clear, if you look at the productivity that happened during COVID, and some of it was because of all the extra money, but a lot of it not, a lot of it was behavioral, is that it was very clear that the productivity was a multiple, which is greater than the divisor that people had because they had to share results. So what do I mean by that? The answer is 1 + 1 = 3. That's what I'm saying. So if one person is operating, they have 1 unit of productivity, another person operating, they have 1 unit of productivity, you might say, well, we're going to work together, and then we have 2 units of productivity. But my great fear is they're going to get more credit than me, so I'm going to end up with 0.5 units of creativity, of productivity and credit. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. That's the typical,
Right.
Well-known in economics, right? But what happened was that yes, they had to share credit, so their credit got cut in half. But the output was 3x,
Yeah.
not 2x.
Right.
So they went from being one unit to 1.5, even though they shared.
Right. Because our time is limited, what are you most excited about right now? You're speaking to people out there that are dealing with Alzheimer's. My mom, early diagnosis, she's got early onset. We're trying this new, she's going to try a new therapy. My son has epilepsy. What are you, cancer, like what, and I know you're excited about all of it, but what are you seeing one area is going, because I know the Milkin Institute back in the day was like, let's pour money at this one thing, cure it, and move on to the next. I don't know. That's a simple version of it, but what are you most excited about right now?
Well, I'm a systems guy, as you can probably tell, and I'm always looking for the generalizable solution, both because that's the way to make the most headway, and because I firmly believe that we will learn from doing A and applying to B if we do it, intentionally. And so, of course, I'm excited about all the new modalities. I mean, who couldn't be? Gene editing, CRISPR, all of these things, all kinds of new modalities that are completely, the listeners may not realize, when I got into this business, they didn't exist. There was one kind of intervention. It was a small molecule drug. It was an organic compound, and those are still very valuable. But there's 20 other potential ways to manipulate disease in the body, a lot of which are already in the clinic, and others are coming. So that's very exciting. The problem, as I see it, is something highly relevant to the epilepsies, which is that the way we think about these diseases is fundamentally flawed, and that is beginning to change. And what I mean by that is that we think about epilepsy as a disease,
right?
as if it was a process which is uniform between all the people who have this diagnosis. And so what I'm seeing, and this is what I'm working on at my current company, is other diseases. And I think epilepsy should be a poster child for this, is to do for those diseases what has happened in cancer in the last 50 years, right? So if we all think about those of us who are old enough to think about this, Greg, you're probably not in that category.
I am.
But
no, I put, I use Just for Men, so I'm right there with you. Don't worry.
Okay, so you're right.
Yeah.
But you remember back in the 70s, cancer was a disease.
Yeah.
Right.
And what did we have? Didn't matter where the source was, they were all the same. And the treatments that we had were highly toxic cell poisons with limited efficacy.
Right.
Cancer is now hundreds of different diseases based on clinical characteristics, pathology, disease course, molecular characteristics. And since we've done that, we now have much more effective and decreased toxicity therapies. We look at other disorders. Epilepsy, not the epilepsies, but epilepsy, Alzheimer's disease, congestive heart failure, chronic kidney failure, schizophrenia. To call those one disease is as absurd as calling cancer one disease.
Yes.
So the question is, how do we disarticulate that complexity? And that's what's so exciting. It's becoming possible to do this for the first time with the advent of three things. One is or perhaps four. One is what I hope to be a growing knowledge that we've got to rethink what these diseases are. It's not epilepsy, it's the epilepsies, plural.
Yeah.
Just like, I often make this, I'll come back to these, but it's an analogy I always think about is, back years ago, a cough was a disease. You may not know that, but cough was a disease. And so you get treated, and I've worked overseas, and cough still is a disease. And so the treatments are highly toxic and non-effective.
Right.
Now, if you go in now and you have cough, well, everybody's going to say, well, is it smoke inhalation? Right. Is it viral infection? Is it a bacterial infection? Do you have gastroesophageal reflux disease, and that's what's causing the cough? And you have a therapy depending on what the cause. And even beyond that, if it's a bacterial disease, what kind of bacteria? You could so
right.
Where we are with epilepsy, it's like cough. It's a symptom.
Yeah.
It is not a disease. It is a symptom, for heaven's sake.
Right.
And so people are beginning to realize that. It's becoming possible to disarticulate that complexity with resources that are not yet available broadly, need to be in the epilepsy community, which is detailed clinical data across many people.
Mm-hmm.
Millions of people, natural history data. What that allows you to do is take two people who have the same diagnosis and say they have certain things in common. Obviously, they have seizures,
right?
But they got 20 other things that are different, and so to treat them all the same is absurd. And when you do that, and we're talking about the non-genetic causes now, when you do that, you recognize that there are I think potentially hundreds or maybe even more, just like a cancer, of these of causes of this disorder. What that allows you to do, that decreased complexity, allows you to use genetics and other things to connect to a mechanism. What is causing the problem?
Yeah.
And once you have a mechanism, you can figure out what the target is to intervene on to reverse the mechanism.
Right, and you identify many different epilepsies, then you identify many different causes, and you can really narrow it down.
Coming up on Talk About It.
Nevi e solioni al concerto di tromboni, di bombarde di cannone, che le pale in tutti i tuoni all'orecchio fan fischiar.
Just want to pop out and talk about how important it is not only for scientists and doctors to talk together. That's what Dr. Austin is all about, getting them behind the scenes, behind the curtain. But also, it's important for us caregivers, for us patients to talk. It's important for us to exchange information, not just for our own well-being and for our own knowledge and for us to be empowered by the information we get from others. A couple of places to do that. Talkaboutit.org, obviously. Friendswithepilepsy.com. friendswithepilepsy.com. It's the epilepsy social network. It's powered by Nourish, and it is a wonderful place to exchange ideas, thoughts, diagnosis, just from a caregiver and patient perspective, like a Facebook for people that have epilepsy. So encourage you to go to friendswithepilepsy.com. Obviously, go to talkaboutit.org. Go to talkaboutitonvideo.com. Just keep the conversation going. And again, just a quick plug for the series that I do called the Caregiver Series. Go to thecaregiverseries.com. I'm talking to caregivers all over the country, and I'm learning from them. So please don't be afraid. Go to thecaregiverseries.com. Let's talk about it. Let's get back to our incredible conversation right now. You are so good at, and everybody you work with is so good at getting the community on the medical side, on the science side, to talk about it, to talk with each other, to open up. What can we do as patients, as caregivers? Is there information that we can provide? Is there a place we can go to provide that information in a way that is to the point, on the computer or something? I always encourage people to be as efficient we do, Phil and I and Ken, as efficient as possible when we go see the neurologist or your epileptologist, to have the information. Don't waste anybody's time. This is what happened, when the seizure happened, what causes it, here are my triggers. What can we do to provide more information on our end? Because it's not just behind the scenes, behind the curtain. It's us that affect it as well, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is what you're already doing. One of the things that I always used to say when I was at NCATS, and it's absolutely true, that when I look at disruptive technologies, which are going to be game changers, patient involvement in development of treatments for their own diseases is one of the greatest disruptive technologies in this space. And so everybody listening to this has to realize this. It has not been the case. But think about this. Is there any other consumer good that is developed without the intended consumers?
Yeah.
You would never do that.
Never.
It's completely crazy. So, but realize that unlike in other fields where if you're developing toothpaste, I better have a focus group of people so I don't develop, lawn fertilizer flavored toothpaste,
right?
Which probably is novel. Nobody has an IP on it, not a lot of
or right? Bacon. Bacon would work for me. I would use bacon.
Right. Well, there might be some. All right.
Yeah.
But the point is that the patients need to realize that they need to get comfortable with taking their rightful place as a member of the research team.
Yes.
And that's uncomfortable. It doesn't fit the Marcus Welby, model, and we all, but it just doesn't. You have to realize that that's the case. So don't feel bad about claiming, because in reality it's true, that you know more about your disease or your child's disease in many ways than the doctor does.
Yeah.
For all kinds of reasons I don't need to tell you.
Yeah.
And so that's number one. Number two is to the degree that you talk to caregivers, policymakers and fundraising people, make it clear that you're, in the old adage, you're not just bringing them a problem, you're bringing them a solution. And the solution is that it's not just more money, it's more money to do these things, clinical characteristics, genetics, sharing of data, common database, natural history data, cell lines, cells, IPS-driven cells from people who have these disorders, where we can model them in the way that we're talking about. That will really speak to both the both congressional people and I think to the folks at NIH too.
Yeah.
Your dream for the future, just thinking about your utopia, where it's like the future at Vesalius, if you get your dream accomplished, what does that look like for families? And is it more of like a ultra precision medicine? So a person gets, has symptoms, they go into the doc, they get checked out, they go through a system of diagnostics, and they get some very ultra tailored therapy that can help them specifically. Is that what is your dream?
Yeah, it's not ultra tailored. It's more Men's Warehouse. That's really right. Because
so you're only going to work Tuesday through Friday? Is that what it is?
No.
You want Monday off?
What I mean by that is
you're going to like the way you feel. I guarantee it.
if we use the clothing analogy, right? Now it's a one size fits all. You know, you go in, you get the FDA approved pants, and it's either too high, too big, too small, doesn't matter. You know, that's one size. It doesn't fit most people. Or you can go to a tailor in Italy and pay $1 zillion, but you don't need that either. What you need is segmented therapy. You know, I'm a 40 long, so as long as I know that, I can get it. That's what you need.
Yeah.
And so what patients will have, and this is not just true with epilepsy, but it's true with all of these other disorders, instead of being told, what I imagine many people being told now, well, yeah, you know, this happened. You know, we really don't know. We really don't know why. We really don't know what the cause is. We don't know whether it's going to recur or not. We have no idea what the natural history is going to be. We have no idea how to tell you what's going to happen down the road because we don't know what's causing it. And we can control the symptoms, but we can't really control anything beyond that. Have a nice day. And instead of that, patients will be told, okay, Greg, Phil, we can profile you. That's sometimes a bad word, but it's a good word in this case. We can profile you to say this is the kind of disease you have, and you may only have one symptom now, but we have good reason to think that you're going to have other things as well, and this puts you into this category. This category has been associated with this mechanism. This mechanism, therefore, has made it tractable from a drug development standpoint, and there is a drug available for this group, for the 40 long people.
Right. Oh, to be 40 long again. You keep throwing that out.
You're right, exactly. You are,
eating away at me. Yeah, that's
amazing.
People will have not just symptomatic therapy, they will have disease modifying therapy. Because what a lot of people don't realize, and I would, really stress this when you talk to people, epilepsy, there's a lot of different epilepsies, right? But a lot of them are progressive. Seizures are bad for the brain.
Yeah.
And I don't think most people realize that. They realize if you have heart disease and you have chest pain, time equals brain, right? Time equals heart. So, but I don't think people realize that. And so they tend to think, I got epilepsy. Yeah, you got a cough. It'll go away. No big deal.
Right.
That is not true.
I tell people that all the time. Don't settle. I talk to people and they're like, well, I said, how you doing? How's your daughter doing? Well, she's having about 4 seizures a month, 5 seizures. I'm like, that's not acceptable. You have to keep asking questions, keep talking to the doctor, find new research and do things for yourself, advocate for yourself. The
other thing we should do, I'll just leave you with one other thought, is that and I don't know who these would be for your community, but what I've found over and over again, and this is true in the history of science, if you look over and over and over again, hundreds of years of science, when have really quantal changes happened? They've happened when fields come together that think they have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
And that's hard, right? Because fields are like magnets; they repel each other. But when that happens, and they're oriented the right way, what happens to a magnet, right? You turn it in the right direction, and they stick together.
Yeah.
And so it takes some work.
And they're both stronger for it. They're both stronger for it. Yeah.
Yes. And so think about who these people might be. These other disciplines that you might not have thought of. These other people who you might not have thought of to bring into the mix.
Well, you've already suggested it 3 times that we're going to do other episodes. I'm taking you up on this. You are so wonderful in what you're doing. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for coming on. I know how busy you are. We're going to leave everybody with you singing opera, and I just cannot thank you enough for everything that you're doing to bring the community together. Where can people go as patients? I encourage you to go to talkaboutit.org. Go to Nourish. Tell your story. Talk to others. Where do you recommend that people go just to learn more about what you've been talking about?
Oh, good. The NCATS website is the best one. The Vesalius website, we're a typical startup company with a bad website, so don't come to our website.
Okay. If you need a spokesperson, I'm right here.
Yeah.
I'm right here.
Yeah.
I love
the NCATS website is fantastic.
NCATS website. Okay, great.
Resources there.
Perfect.
Chris,
Thank you
for everything. Thank you for everything you've done and everything you continue to do. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
All right. We'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.
Okay, mind blown. There's so much hope, so much information, so many exciting things that we just heard. But one of the other things that we alluded to and played at the top of the podcast is Dr. Austin singing opera. Here's a guy who can not only articulate in a way that we all understand, but he's also musical. We talked about it. We touched on it. Doc, take us out with some incredible opera. Thanks for checking out this episode of Talk About It, and we'll see you next time.
Notte giorno d'intorno girando, delle belle torbando il riposo, narcisetto a un giro d'amor. Collo dritto, muso franco, un gran casco, un gran turbante, molto onor, poco cantante.
I came in for some toilet paper left with a car.
Invece del fandango, una marcia per il fango. Con nevi e solioni al concerto di tromboni, di bambarde di cannone, che le palean tutti i tuoni all'orecchio fan fischiar.
So good!
Quell'aria brillante delle belle torbando il riposo, narcisetto a un giro d'amor. Cherubino alla vittoria, alla gloria militar. Cherubino alla vittoria, alla gloria militar, alla gloria militar.
Bravo! Bravo! Come on! That was absolutely incredible. Special thanks to our sponsor, SeizuresAreSigns.com. Thank you to J.J. Abrams for our theme music. Thank you to Nick Marzak for producing, directing, editing, and incidental music. On behalf of my fellow producers, Phil Gattone, Ken Lohenberg, and Nick Marzak, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you're not watching, go to talkaboutitonvideo.com to watch these episodes. They're now on video as well. I'm Greg Grunberg. Don't forget to talk about it, and I will see you next time. This podcast is a production of the Talk About It Company.